No one really noticed his shoes. They were plain, worn, and always dusty. The kind of shoes that told stories if you stared long enough. The sole was starting to peel near the heel, and the laces had been replaced with mismatched strings. But still, every morning without fail, he walked through the school gates in them, head down, backpack slightly torn, and that same determined pace, like he was walking towards something much bigger than the schoolyard. His name was Elias. Quiet, soft-spoken, always sitting in the second row, not too close to be noticed, not too far to be ignored. He was never late, never complained. And yet, no one really asked why he always looked tired or why he stayed behind after dismissal, long after the others had gone home. He was just there, like part of the background, until he wasn't. The year started like any other. Everyone came back from break wearing new sneakers, some flashing with lights, others limited edition and loud in color. Elias, however, stepped back in with the same old pair he'd worn last June. No one mocked him openly, but the glances, the quiet laughs behind hands, they were loud enough. Still, Elias never reacted. He simply walked past, eyes forward, never looking down, not even at the shoes he never changed. In class, he wasn't the loudest, but teachers knew his name. His papers were always turned in early, margins full of scribbled notes, corners folded and dog-eared from rereading. One day, Mr. Carter, the science teacher, handed back their quizzes and paused at Elias's desk. "Top score again," he said with a small smile. Elias just nodded. No grin, no smugness, just a quiet thank you. Eyes already back on the next page of his notebook. Some students started to notice, not his shoes but his work ethic. He wasn't just smart, he worked for it. While others spent breaks on their phones or talking, Elias was often under the old mango tree by the fence, flipping through borrowed textbooks or scribbling ideas in a second-hand journal. Rain or shine, his routine didn't change. Shoes muddy? He didn't care. Laces loose? He tied them back up with the same fraying knots and kept moving. Then one afternoon, during a heavy storm, something happened. The school was releasing early, due to flooding in some parts of the town. Parents were calling in, cars were lining up. Most students were excited, an unexpected half-day. But Elias didn't move. He stood by the gate, dripping wet, watching as everyone left. "Elias," the guard called out. "Don't you have someone picking you up?" He shook his head. "Where do you live, son?" Elias simply pointed down the road. Then further, then even further. The guard blinked. "You walk home? In this?" "Yes, sir." The man looked at his shoes, soaked, tired, and then at the boy wearing them, drenched but steady. No anger, no tears, just a quiet acceptance. Later that week, one of the teachers started talking in the lounge. "You know Elias walks nearly 7 kilometers to school?" "No way," another replied. "Every day? Rain or sun?" That was when things started to shift. Students began noticing how Elias was always there before the gates opened, how he never asked for help, but offered it, how he tutored others when they were struggling, how he used the library even during lunch. His shoes, those same ones, became a symbol, not of poverty, but of purpose. But the truth was, Elias's life wasn't easy. His mother worked 2 jobs, both of which paid little and demanded a lot. His father had left long ago. Their small home was nestled beyond the hills, in a district few of his classmates had ever been to. Some nights, they had only rice and water. And still, Elias never missed a homework, never missed a class. He had made a promise to himself a long time ago that he would walk through every challenge one step at a time, no matter how worn the shoes. Mid-year came, and with it, the school's annual Future Leaders Week. There were workshops, guest speakers, and a big essay competition. The theme? Walking toward your dream. The irony wasn't lost on Elias. He wrote his essay late into the night, under the weak light of a recycled lamp. He didn't write about grades or ambitions. He wrote about walking, about how each step taught him something, about how you didn't need fancy shoes to go far, you just needed a reason. He submitted the essay quietly, no fanfare, no expectations. A week later, during morning assembly, the principal stepped up to the microphone, holding a sheet of paper. "This year's essay winner didn't use the fanciest words," she began, "but he used the truest ones." There was silence. Then, "Congratulations, Elias." There was a stunned pause, then claps, some louder than others. Elias stood, surprised. He walked up to the stage, those same old shoes echoing softly on the wooden floor. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. His words were printed on a poster the school would soon display in the hallway. "I walk every day because standing still gets me nowhere. My shoes are old, but they've carried me through storms, through hunger, through doubt. Each step I take is a promise to myself that one day I'll walk into a future I built 1 mile, one day, one dream at a time." From that day on, students didn't mock his shoes anymore. In fact, they began to admire them. Some even asked if he could help them study. Others offered to walk with him part of the way. A few even stopped bringing up the brands they wore and instead talked about the books they read or the goals they had. But despite all the new attention, Elias stayed the same: humble, focused, grateful. The second half of the year would bring even more challenges: a family emergency, a financial crisis, a major school competition, and a moment that would test everything he believed in. But for now, Elias kept walking, one step at a time, through the hallways, through the doubts, through the journey that wasn't paved with ease but with meaning. Not long after the essay win, Elias was invited to represent his class in an inter-school academic challenge. It was the kind of competition students usually trained for with private coaches and well-funded resources. Elias had none of those. But he did have the quiet confidence of someone who had walked a much longer road just to get to where others started. His classmates were supportive now, rallying behind him. They formed a small study group, met at lunch, and even asked Elias to lead some of the reviews. For the first time, he wasn't walking alone figuratively or literally. Even if his shoes still bore the same holes, the road ahead didn't feel quite as lonely. The competition day came on a weekend. Elias woke early, made instant coffee for his mother, and slipped into his pressed but faded uniform. He brushed off the dirt from his shoes as best as he could. He didn't have money for polish, but he had pride. The venue was grand, air-conditioned, decorated, filled with students from schools that boasted of achievements and trophies in their lobbies. Elias didn't shrink. He simply sat down, opened his notes, and reviewed quietly. When the quiz began, his hands didn't shake. Every question was like a step forward. Every answer reminded him of those long walks, of reciting equations under his breath while climbing hills, of memorizing facts under flickering light. And as the final buzzer sounded, everyone turned to the scoreboard. Elias had won. Not just one, he'd broken a long-standing record. The auditorium burst into applause. Students from other schools congratulated him. His classmates were shouting his name. Teachers beamed. But Elias? He simply nodded and smiled, small and humble, then sat back down. An hour later, when everyone was posing for photos and being picked up in cars, Elias slipped away. He had no ride, just his feet and those same shoes. He began the long walk home, medal tucked in his pocket, heart full. But that night, his mother fell ill. It was sudden. She collapsed after dinner. Elias carried her, barefoot, running down the road until he found a neighbor with a motorbike. They rushed her to the small clinic, where the nurse said she needed medication that wasn't available locally. They would have to travel to the city. And just like that, everything changed. Elias missed 3 days of school. He used the small prize money from the essay contest to pay for her treatment. He sold the few belongings he had left. And when there was nothing more to sell, he stopped eating lunch so she could. The principal noticed his absence and called his home. When she learned the truth, she visited with some teachers, bringing groceries and a small fund from the faculty. Elias was embarrassed, but they told him, "Even the strongest walkers need rest. Let us carry you for a while." He returned to school quietly, and his classmates welcomed him with handmade cards and a desk filled with snacks. One of them had even sewn a patch onto his shoe where the sole was tearing. Midterms came. Elias still aced them, but his mind was elsewhere, on his mother's health, on bills piling up, on whether walking this hard was even worth it. He never said it aloud, but the spark in his eyes had dimmed, until one day, something unexpected happened. The school held an assembly to introduce a group of alumni who had come back to speak. Among them was a man in a crisp blazer who seemed out of place. young, successful, and clearly confident. He introduced himself as Miguel Alonso, former student. One of the alumni asked him why he had come back after so many years. He smiled and replied, "Because I remember what it was like to be the quiet kid with nothing but dreams and old shoes." Elias's ears perked up. Miguel shared his story how he, too, had walked miles to school, faced hunger, doubt, and isolation. But he had one thing that kept him going: belief. Believe that walking forward step after step would eventually lead somewhere. As he finished, he looked around the room and said, "There's someone sitting here right now who reminds me of who I used to be. I don't know your name, but I know your walk." Elias felt a lump rise in his throat. After the assembly, the principal introduced them. Miguel smiled and said, "So you're the one with the essay and the shoes." Elias laughed nervously. "I guess." Miguel didn't say much more, but the next day, Elias was called to the office and given a scholarship application. "It's full tuition," the principal said. "Miguel sponsors one student every year. He chose you." Tears welled in Elias's eyes. Not because he needed charity, but because, for the first time, someone saw not just his shoes but the road he had walked in them. He filled out the forms, submitted the essays, and waited. Weeks passed. His mother slowly got better. His shoes were still holding on, but barely. And then, the letter arrived. Accepted. A scholarship. A future. A chance. At the year-end ceremony, Elias was asked to give a speech. He hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his thing. But when he stepped on that stage, metal glinting under the lights, worn shoes peeking under his pants, he looked at the crowd and said, "I didn't get here because I had the best. I got here because I didn't stop. I walked in shoes that others would have thrown away. I walked through mud, through storms, through mornings without breakfast. But I never stopped walking. Because every step took me closer not just to school, but to becoming someone I could be proud of." There was silence, then thunderous applause. He ended with a smile and a nod. You don't need new shoes to walk far. You just need the will to move forward even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. That year, Elias graduated at the top of his class. He left behind the same school where he once walked in unnoticed, and as he stepped into a university with new shoes, gifted by his classmates, he still kept the old pair in his bag, not as a memory of struggle, but as proof of strength. Moral of the story: it's not about what you wear, it's about how far you're willing to go. Everyone has challenges, but it's those who keep walking no matter the weight, no matter the wear, who truly go the distance.